A lot of details came out in court today for the hearing of Quadajah Johnson, including the fact that this was the first time when the shooting unfolded that she allegedly laid eyes on Romeca Blackman. We know that she and Romeca Blackman, they both have children by the same man. And for the very first time, we are hearing from Carlos Smith. He was the man on the scene when this tragic shooting unfolded. So a lot of information came out in court today. Witnesses saying what they saw, but you were there. What's your reaction to what you heard came out in court today?
When I heard it, I'm just looking, it was unbelievable, but I was there. And I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here, and I hope everybody understand. That's really it. I can't even say too much right now. Because it's just gonna feel like I'm going against them, they going against me, we just going back and forth. But the truth is gonna come out.
And your mama will always be right there for you. You want to say something to her, look down at your heart. And whatever you say to her, say it to her right there. The same way I have to do. I have to look right here. And I have to talk to her. And ask her, just tell me what happened.
There's a moment in every high-profile case where the public narrative collides with legal reality, and what everyone thought they knew suddenly shifts beneath their feet. For weeks, maybe months, people choose sides. They argue online, they create hashtags, they defend or condemn based on fragment of information filtered through social media posts and news clips. And then the courtroom doors close, the judge speaks, and the stakes become devastatingly real. This is one of those moments. This is a story of a shooting that happened in broad daylight, a woman who walked free claiming self-defense, and a legal system that spent 3 months building a case that would eventually charge her with first-degree murder. This is about Quadajah Johnson, known online as Holly, and the death of 31-year-old Romeca Meeks Blackman. And if you're here because you've been following this case, because you've seen the hashtags, because you've wondered how someone could be arrested and released, and then rearrested months later with a murder charge, then stay with me, because what happened in this case reveals something crucial about how our justice system works, about the gap between what feels right and what the law requires, and about the very real consequences that come when someone's life is weighed in a courtroom. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe these cases deserve more than just headlines and hot takes, subscribe to this channel. We're going to go deep, we're going to follow the evidence, and we're going to talk about what happens next. Let's begin. September 8th. South Loop, Chicago, a neighborhood where people go about their daily lives, with the sound of the city hum in the background, where no one expects their ordinary Sunday to become the backdrop for something that will ripple across the country. On that day, Romeca Meeks Blackman, 31 years old, lost his life, and the person accused of taking it was someone he knew, someone he shared a child with, someone who, within hours of his death, would be arrested, questioned, and then released without charges. Her name is Quadajah Johnson. Online, she goes by Holly. And what happened that day, what was said, what was seen, what was claimed, will become the center of one of the most debated cases in recent Chicago history. Because here's the thing about self-defense claims. They're powerful. They can stop a prosecution in its tracks. When someone says, "I fear for my life, I had no choice," the burden shifts. Law enforcement can't just arrest and charge based on the fact that someone died. They have to prove that the act wasn't justified. They have to dismantle the self-defense claim piece by piece. And on September 8th, the Chicago Police Department didn't believe they had enough evidence to do that. Not yet. So Holly walked free, and the public exploded. Imagine being Romeca's family. Imagine being told that your son, your brother, your father was shot and killed, and then watching the person who admitted to pulling the trigger walk away. No charges, no arrest, just released. How does that happen? How does someone take a life and go home the same day? The anger was immediate. The confusion was palpable. Social media lit up with outrage, with demands for justice, with questions that echoed across the country. How did she just walk away? And the answer, as frustrating as it might be, comes down to the law. It comes down to what can be proven in a courtroom versus what people believe happened on the street. Holly claimed self-defense. She said she feared for her life. And without evidence strong enough to immediately contradict that claim, the police had to release her while they investigated further. This is where the gap exists, that painful space between what families need, answers, accountability, closure, and what the legal system requires, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And for 3 months, while Holly was free, while the hashtag circulated, while people debated online, the investigation continued. Detectives gathered evidence. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed footage, statements, timelines. They built a case. And on December 4th, nearly 3 months after Romeca's death, Holly was arrested again. This time, she was charged with first-degree murder. This time, there would be no release. Let's talk about what first-degree murder means, because the weight of those words needs to be understood. In Illinois, first-degree murder isn't just a serious charge. It's the most serious charge you can face for taking someone's life. It means the state believed the killing was intentional, that it was committed with the knowledge that the actions would cause death or great bodily harm. And the sentencing reflects that severity. Illinois abolished the death penalty, so execution is off the table. But what remains is a mandatory prison sentence that, at minimum, spans 20 years. At maximum, 60 years. And under certain extended term provisions, that can stretch to 100 years. Holly Johnson is 30 years old. If convicted on this charge, the math is brutal. Even with the minimum sentence, she wouldn't see freedom again until she's 50. With the maximum, she'd be 90, 100, or more likely, she'd die behind bars. This is not a slap on the wrist. This is not a charge that gets pleaded down to probation and community service. This is the state of Illinois saying, we believe you committed murder, and we're prepared to prove it. But here's where the story gets more complex, because the charge is only the beginning. The question that haunts every criminal case, the question that keeps defense attorneys up at night and gives prosecutors leverage, is this: can we prove it? Can we convince 12 strangers, 12 jurors who walk into that courtroom with their own biases and experiences and doubts, that this happened the way we say it did? Because that's the gamble. That's the risk. And it's why, even in cases that seem airtight, even in cases where the evidence feels overwhelming, prosecutors consider plea deals. Not because they're weak, not because they're letting someone off easy, but because a plea deal is a guarantee. It removes the unpredictability of a jury trial. It ensures that the defendant will face consequences, will serve time, will be held accountable. And in a case like this, where self-defense has already been claimed, where the narrative is already being shaped by social media, where one sympathetic juror could derail everything, a plea deal might be the smartest move the state can make. So let's break this down. Let's talk about why a plea deal isn't a sign of weakness, and why, if Holly's attorney is smart, they're already negotiating one. Because the alternative, going to trial on a first-degree murder charge, is a risk that could cost Holly the rest of her life. Trials are unpredictable. You can have what looks like a slam-dunk case. You can have video evidence, witness testimony, forensic reports, confessions, and still lose. Why? Because juries are human. They make decisions based not just on facts, but on feelings, on how a witness presents themselves, on whether they believe the defendant is remorseful, on whether the defense attorney can plant just enough doubt to make them hesitate. And in this case, Holly has already admitted to shooting Romeca. That's not in dispute. What's in dispute is whether it was justified, whether she truly feared for her life, whether the law should excuse her actions because she believes she had no other choice. And all it takes is one juror, one person out of 12 who says, I believe she was scared. I believe she thought she had to do it. And suddenly you have a hung jury. Suddenly, the state has to decide whether to retry the case, whether to go through the whole process again, whether to risk another hung jury or even acquittal. A plea deal takes that risk off the table. Let's talk about what a plea deal might look like in this case, because it's not what people think. It's not Holly walking free. It's not her getting a slap on the wrist and going back to her life. A plea deal in a first-degree murder case, especially one involving a firearm, still means serious prison time. The state might offer to reduce the charge to second-degree murder, which sounds like a significant drop. But let's be clear about what that actually means. Second-degree murder in Illinois is still a Class 1 felony. It still carries a sentencing range of 4 to 20 years before any enhancements are added. And here's the kicker. Firearm enhancements are mandatory. If you use a gun and commission a felony, the law requires additional years to be tacked onto your sentence. In a second-degree murder case involving a firearm, that enhancement can add 15 to 25 years. So even if Holly pleads to second-degree murder, even if the state agrees to reduce the charge, she's still looking at 19 to 45 years in prison. She's 30 years old. With the maximum sentence, she'd be 75 before she's eligible for release. With a minimum, she'd be 49. And that's only if she qualifies for good behavior credits, which can reduce a sentence by up to 50%. But those credits aren't guaranteed. They require compliance, model behavior, participation in programs. And they're not available for first-degree murder convictions. That's leverage. That's why a plea deal matters. Now let's talk about why the judge refused to grant Holly bail. Because this is where the case gets even more damning. When someone is arrested and charged, they typically have the right to post bail and await trial outside of custody. But that right isn't absolute. A judge can deny bail if they believe the defendant poses a danger to the community or is a flight risk. In Holly's case, the judge looked at the evidence and made a decision. He said, and these are the words that echo through the courtroom, that someone like Holly does not deserve to be out roaming the streets. What did the judge see that led to that conclusion? What evidence was presented that made him believe Holly was a danger? We don't have access to every detail, but we know some things. We know that Romeca was allegedly in a headlock when Holly shot him. A headlock, meaning someone else had physical control of him. Someone else was restraining him. And in that moment, Holly pulled a gun and fired. The question the judge had to consider is this. Was that necessary? If someone else had Romeca restrained, if he was an immediate threat to Holly in that moment, then why did she need to use lethal force? That's the question that haunts this case. That's the question the state will ask a jury if this goes to trial. But it's not just the shooting itself that concerned the judge. It's what happened after. It's how Holly behaved in the hours and days following Romeca's death. According to reports, there was a fist bump, a gesture, a moment that was captured and that prosecutors argued showed a lack of remorse, a lack of understanding of the gravity of what had just happened. Now, we have to be careful here. We have to acknowledge that people process trauma in different ways. Shock can make people act in ways that seem inappropriate, that seem callous, that don't align with what we expect grief or fear to look like. But in a courtroom, perception matters. Juries don't just hear facts. They watch behavior. They assess demeanor. They make judgments about whether someone seems sorry, whether they seem to understand the weight of their actions. And if the state can show that Holly was cavalier, that she was celebrating or unbothered or defiant, that becomes a narrative. That becomes evidence not of self-defense, but of something else, something darker. And then there's social media. Because Holly didn't just go quiet after being released. She posted, she engaged, she defended herself online. And while everyone has a right to tell their story, while everyone has a right to push back against public narratives, those posts become evidence. They become part of the record. Prosecutors can point to them and say, look at how she behaved. Look at what she said. Does this look like someone who was traumatized? Does this look like someone who was terrified for their life? Again, we have to be careful. We have to remember that social media is performative, that what people post isn't always reflective of what they feel, that the court of public opinion isn't the same as a court of law. But the judge saw enough. He saw enough to say no bail. He saw enough to say this person should not be free while awaiting trial. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave Holly? If her attorney is worth anything, they're having a very serious conversation right now about options, about risk, about what happens if this case goes to trial and a jury convicts her of first-degree murder. Because the math doesn't lie. 20 years minimum, 60 years maximum, potentially 100 under extended terms. No parole eligibility for decades. No good behavior credits to cut the sentence in half. A life spent behind bars. Compare that to a plea deal. 19 to 45 years on a second-degree conviction with firearm enhancements. eligibility for good behavior credits that could reduce the sentence by half, a possibility, however slim, of walking free at 55 instead of never. That's not an easy choice. That's not a decision anyone wants to make, but it might be the only rational choice. Because here's the thing about trials. They're a gamble. And when the stakes are your entire life, when the difference between a plea and a conviction is decades of freedom, you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk? Let's talk about the legal concept of self-defense, because understanding it is crucial to understanding this case. Self-defense isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's an affirmative defense, which means a defendant is admitting they committed the act but arguing it was justified. To successfully claim self-defense in Illinois, you have to prove several things. You have to prove that you reasonably believed you were in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. You have to prove that the force you used was necessary to prevent that harm. And you have to prove that you weren't the initial aggressor, that you didn't provoke the confrontation. Those are high bars, and they're subjective. What seems reasonable to one person might not seem reasonable to a jury. What feels like imminent danger in the moment might not look that way when examined in the cold light of a courtroom months later. And that's where self-defense claims often fall apart. Because the law doesn't just ask what you believed in the moment. It asks what a reasonable person would have believed. And if a jury decides that a reasonable person wouldn't have felt the need to use lethal force, then the self-defense claim fails, and you're left with a murder conviction. In Holly's case, the state is arguing that the use of lethal force wasn't reasonable. They're arguing that Romeca was already restrained, that he was in a headlock, that he was an immediate threat to Holly when she fired. And if they can prove that, if they can show that Holly had other options, that she could have walked away or called for help or de-escalated, then the self-defense claim crumbles. But proving that isn't easy, because Holly will argue that she felt threatened. She'll argue that she didn't know how long Romeca would stay restrained, that she feared what would happen if he got free, that in that moment, she believed her life was in danger, and all she needs is for one juror to believe her. One juror to say, I understand why she felt that way. I understand why she thought she had to act. And suddenly, the state's case is in jeopardy. This is why prosecutors offer plea deals. This is why, even when they believe they have a strong case, they're willing to negotiate, because a trial is a risk. A trial is unpredictable, and a hung jury or an acquittal means Romeca's family gets no justice. It means Holly walks free, and that's not a risk the state wants to take. A plea deal, even one that reduces a charge, still guarantees accountability. It still guarantees prison time. It still guarantees that Holly won't walk away from this without consequences. And for the state, for the prosecutors who have spent months building this case, that guarantee might be worth more than the gamble of a trial. Now, let's talk about firearm enhancements, because they're a critical part of this case, and they're often misunderstood. In Illinois, if you use a firearm in the commission of felony, the law requires mandatory additional years to be added to your sentence. These aren't discretionary. The judge doesn't get to decide whether to apply them. They're automatic, and they're significant. For a second-degree murder conviction, a firearm enhancement can add 15 to 25 years to the base sentence. That means even if Holly pleads to second-degree murder and receives a minimum base sentence of 4 years, the firearm enhancement brings a total to at least 19 years. And if she receives a maximum base sentence of 20 years, the enhancement could bring the total to 45 years. There's no escaping it. There's no negotiating it away. The firearm was used. The enhancement applies. And that's leverage for the prosecution. Because even in a plea deal, even with reduced charge, Holly is still facing decades in prison. What does that mean practically? It means that if Holly's attorney manages to negotiate a plea to second-degree murder, which would be considered a significant win for the defense, Holly is still looking at nearly 2 decades behind bars at minimum. She's 30 years old. She won't be eligible for release until she's in her late 40s at the earliest. And that's assuming she qualifies for good behavior credits, which, as I mentioned, can reduce a sentence by up to 50%. But those credits aren't guaranteed. They require consistent compliance with prison rules, participation in rehabilitative programs, a clean disciplinary record, one major infraction, one violent incident, one rule violation, and those credits can be revoked. So while the possibility of release at 49 exists, the reality might be much longer. And if she receives a maximum sentence with enhancements, she's looking at 75 years old before she sees freedom again. That's the rest of her life. That's dying in prison. That's never holding her child outside of a visitation room again. Let's take a moment to think about what that means for everyone involved. For Romeca's family, there's no sentence that will bring him back. There's no amount of prison time that will undo the loss. But there's a difference between no justice and some justice. There's a difference between watching someone walk free and knowing they're being held accountable. A plea deal might not feel like enough. It might not satisfy the anger, the grief, the sense that nothing can ever be made right. But it's something. It's a guarantee that Holly will face consequences, that she won't be able to argue her way out of this, that she won't walk free if a jury gets it wrong. For Holly's family, for a child, this is a nightmare. This is watching someone you love face the possibility of never coming home. This is trying to explain to a child why their mother is gone, why she made the choices she made, why she's spending the rest of her life behind bars. There are no winners here. There's no version of this story where everyone gets what they want. There's only the legal system grinding forward, trying to balance justice and mercy, punishment and accountability. And for the public, for those of us watching from the outside, this case forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions about self-defense laws and when they should apply. Questions about how we evaluate danger, about how we judge someone's actions in a moment of crisis. Questions about social media and how it shapes our perceptions, about whether we're too quick to choose sides, too quick to defend or condemn based on incomplete information. Because the truth is, most of us don't know what really happened that day in September. We know fragments. We know claims and counterclaims. We know what's been reported, what's been posted, what's been argued. But we weren't there. We didn't see what Romeca did or didn't do. We didn't hear what was said. We didn't feel what Holly felt in that moment. And yet we form opinions. We create hashtags. We argue online. We decide who deserves our sympathy and who deserves our condemnation. And maybe that's inevitable. Maybe that's just human nature. But it's worth pausing to acknowledge that the legal system exists for a reason. It exists because mob justice doesn't work. It exists because feelings aren't evidence. It exists because someone has to sift through the noise and the emotion and the competing narratives and figure out what actually happened. And that's what's happening now. The investigation that began on September 8th didn't stop when Holly was released. Detectives kept working. They kept gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building a timeline. And somewhere in that process, they found enough to bring her back in, enough to charge her with first-degree murder, enough to convince a judge that she shouldn't be granted bail. What do they find? We don't know all the details. We know there were witnesses. We know there was likely video footage, phone records, forensic evidence. We know that something shifted between September and December, something that gave prosecutors the confidence to move forward with the most serious charge possible. And now it's in the hands of the courts. Now it's up to prosecutors to prove their case, and up to Holly's attorney to defend her. And somewhere in the middle, there will likely be negotiations. Conversations about plea deals. Discussions about what can be proven, what can be argued, what outcomes are realistic. Here's what we know about the legal options moving forward. If Holly refuses a plea deal and insists on going to trial, she's rolling the dice. She's betting that she can convince a jury that she acted in self-defense, that her fear was reasonable, that she had no other choice. And maybe she can. Maybe her attorney is skilled enough. Maybe the evidence is ambiguous enough. Maybe the jury will sympathize enough to acquit her. But if they don't, if the jury convicts her of first-degree murder, she's facing 20 to 60 years minimum, possibly more. There's no parole. There's no good behavior credit to cut that in half. There's no second chance. That's it. That's the rest of her life. Compare that to a plea deal. If the state offers second-degree murder, Holly would face 19 to 45 years with a possibility of good behavior credits. That's still devastating. That's still most of her adult life spent in prison. But it's not forever. It's not dying behind bars. It's the possibility, however slim, of someday walking free. And here's the thing about plea deals that people often don't understand. They're not about being soft on crime. They're not about letting someone off easy. They're about guaranteeing outcomes. They're about removing the unpredictability of a jury trial, because juries are wildly inconsistent. They're influenced by factors that have nothing to do with the evidence. The likability of a defendant, the charisma of an attorney, the mood in the room, whether a juror had a bad morning, whether a witness stumbles over their words. These things shouldn't matter, but they do. And prosecutors know that. They know that even the strongest case can fall apart in front of a jury. So they offer deals. They say, here's a guaranteed conviction, a guaranteed sentence, a guaranteed outcome. Take it. And we all move forward with certainty. And for someone like Holly, someone facing the rest of her life in prison if she loses at trial, that certainty might be the only lifeline she has. Let's talk about what happens inside a prison for someone serving a sentence like this. Because it's easy to say 20 years or 45 years and not really grasp what that means. It means waking up every single day in a cell. It means losing control over every aspect of your life. What you eat, when you sleep, who you talk to, where you go. It means missing every milestone in your child's life. Every birthday, every graduation, every moment of joy and pain and growth. It means becoming a number, a file, a statistic. It means aging behind bars, watching your youth slip away, knowing that the world outside is moving on without you. It means forming relationships with people you'd never meet otherwise, navigating hierarchies and politics and dangers that most of us can't imagine. It means living with the knowledge that you took someone's life, that someone's family will never forgive you, that nothing you do will ever undo what happened. And it means, if you're lucky, if you survive, if you earn your credits and serve your time, walking out decades later into a world you no longer recognize. A world where technology has changed, where culture has shifted, where everyone you knew has moved on. That's what a prison sentence means. That's what Holly is facing. And for Romeca's family, there's a different kind of sentence. A life sentence of grief, of absence, of wondering what could have been. Romeca was 31 years old. He had a child. He had a family. He had a life that was cut short. And no amount of justice, no prison sentence, no conviction will bring him back. That's the cruel arithmetic of these cases. Someone dies, someone goes to prison, and everyone left behind carries the weight of it for the rest of their lives. There's no win here. There's no version of this story where everyone gets closure and moves on whole. There's only accountability. There's only the hope that the legal system can provide some measure of justice, some sense that what happened mattered, that Romeca's life mattered, that someone is being held responsible. So what happens next? The case moves forward. If there's no plea deal, it goes to trial. A jury is selected. Opening statements are made. Witnesses testify. Evidence is presented. The defense argues self-defense. The prosecution argues murder. And 12 strangers decide what happens to Holly for the rest of her life. Or more likely, there are negotiations. Conversations between Holly's attorney and the state's attorney's office. Discussions about what charge can be agreed upon, what sentence can be recommended, what outcome everyone can live with. And Holly has to make a decision. She has to weigh the certainty of a plea deal against the gamble of a trial. She has to ask herself, am I willing to risk spending the rest of my life in prison for the chance to walk free? Because that's the choice. That's the impossible, agonizing choice that every defendant in her position has to make. If I were advising Holly, if I were her attorney or her family or anyone who cared about her future, here's what I'd say. Take the deal. If the state offers second-degree murder, take it. Yes, it means nearly 2 decades in prison at minimum. Yes, it means losing your 30s and 40s. Yes, it means missing years of your child's life. But it also means you have a future. It means there's a date on the calendar when you could walk free. It means you don't die in prison. It means you have something to work toward, some reason to comply, to participate in programs, to earn those good behavior credits. Compare that to the alternative. Compare that to a first-degree conviction and 20 to 60 years with no possibility of reduction. Compare that to growing old behind bars with no hope of release. The math is brutal, but it's clear. A plea deal is survival. A trial is a gamble with your life. But here's the reality. We don't know what Holly will choose. We don't know what deal, if any, the state will offer. We don't know what evidence they have, what witnesses they'll call, what story they'll tell in court. All we know is that this case is moving forward, that Holly is in custody, denied bail, waiting for her fate to be decided, and that somewhere Romeca's family is waiting too, waiting for accountability, waiting for justice, waiting for something that will never be enough but is all the legal system can offer. Let's step back for a moment and think about the broader implications of this case. Because it's not just about Holly and Romeca. It's about how we as a society handle claims of self-defense. It's about the balance between protecting people's right to defend themselves and holding them accountable when that defense isn't justified. Self-defense laws exist for a reason. They exist because sometimes people are put in situations where they have to act to protect themselves, where waiting for the police is an option, where the threat is real and imminent and deadly. And in those situations, the law says you have the right to use force, even lethal force, to save your own life. But that right isn't unlimited. It's bounded by reasonableness, by necessity, by proportionality. And that's where cases like this get complicated. Because what feels reasonable in the moment might not look reasonable when examined later. What feels like imminent danger might not meet the legal definition. What feels like the only option might, in hindsight, reveal other choices. And then there's a question of who gets to claim self-defense successfully. Because let's be honest, self-defense claims don't work equally for everyone. Study after study has shown that race, gender, socioeconomic status, all of these factors influence whether a self-defense claim is accepted by police, by prosecutors, by juries. A white person claiming self-defense is more likely to be believed than a black person. A man claiming self-defense is often treated differently than a woman. Someone with resources, with a good attorney, with a clean record, has a better chance of making a self-defense claim stick than someone without those advantages. That's not how the law is supposed to work. The law is supposed to be blind to those factors. But the reality is messier. The reality is that implicit biases, societal prejudices, systemic inequalities all seep into these decisions. And that means justice isn't always just. It means some people get the benefit of the doubt and others don't. It means the outcome of a case like this might hinge not just on what happened, but on who was involved, who's making the decisions, and what preconceptions they bring to the table. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm not making claims about Holly's race or background or circumstances that I don't know. What I'm saying is that these factors matter. They shape how cases are investigated, how they're charged, how they're prosecuted, and how they're resolved. And if we want a justice system that's truly fair, we have to acknowledge that and work to address it. We have to ask hard questions about why some self-defense claims are accepted immediately and others trigger 3-month investigations. We have to examine why some people are granted bail and others are denied. We have to look at sentencing disparities, at plea deal outcomes, at all the ways that bias can creep into a system that's supposed to be impartial. But back to the specific case. Back to Holly and Romeca and the decision that's coming. If this case goes to trial, here's what the state will argue. Holly shot Romeca when he was already restrained, when he was an immediate threat, when she had other options. They'll argue that her actions after the shooting, the alleged fist bump, the social media posts, show a lack of remorse, a lack of genuine fear. They'll argue that this wasn't self-defense. It was murder, and they'll ask the jury to convict her and send her to prison for the rest of her life. Holly's defense will argue the opposite. They'll argue that Holly was terrified, that she didn't know how long Romeca would stay restrained, that she reasonably believed her life was in danger. They'll argue that we can't judge her actions from the safety of a courtroom, that we have to understand what it felt like in that moment, when everything was chaos and fear. They'll argue that Holly did what she thought she had to do to survive. And they'll ask the jury to acquit her, to recognize that she acted in self-defense, to let her go home. And the jury will have to decide. 12 people who don't know Holly or Romeca, who weren't there that day, who only have the evidence presented in court. They'll have to sift through testimony and exhibits and arguments and come to a unanimous decision, guilty or not guilty. Murder or self-defense? Prison or freedom? That's an enormous responsibility. That's a decision that will haunt them, that they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. Because they're not just deciding a legal question. They're deciding what happens to a human being. They're deciding whether Holly spends the rest of her life behind bars or walks free. They're deciding whether Romeca's death was a crime or a justified act of self-defense. And there's no easy answer. There's no version of this where everyone agrees, where the right choice is obvious, where the outcome feels just to everyone involved. This is the messy reality of criminal justice. This is what it looks like when the law tries to address an irreversible act, when a system built on rules and procedures tries to account for human fear and violence and tragedy. It's imperfect. It's frustrating. It's often unsatisfying. But it's what we have. And for Holly, for Romeca's family, for everyone watching this case, it's the only path forward. So let me bring this back to the core question. How much prison time is Holly getting? The honest answer is, we don't know yet. If she's convicted of first-degree murder, she's looking at 20 to 60 years minimum, possibly up to 100 under extended terms. If she accepts or is offered a plea deal to second-degree murder, she's looking at 19 to 45 years with possible good behavior credits that could reduce that significantly. If she goes to trial and is acquitted, she walks free. Those are possibilities. Those are the outcomes. And which one becomes reality depends on decisions that haven't been made yet, on negotiations that are likely happening behind closed doors, on evidence we haven't seen, on legal strategies we don't know. But here's what we can say with confidence. Holly is facing serious time. Whether it's 20 years or 45 years or more, she's losing decades of her life. She's losing her freedom. She's losing the ability to raise her child, to live a normal life, to ever fully escape the shadow of what happened on September 8th. And maybe that's justice. Maybe that's what accountability looks like. Or maybe it's tragedy compounded by more tragedy. Maybe it's a system that can only respond to violence with more violence, to loss with more loss. I don't have the answer to that. I don't think anyone does. What I know is that this case, like so many others, reveals the limits of justice, the ways that legal outcomes can never fully address emotional needs, the ways that punishment, even when deserved, doesn't heal wounds, the ways that holding someone accountable doesn't undo what was done. Romeca is gone. No sentence will bring him back. Holly is facing the rest of her life in prison. No verdict will give those years back. And both families are left to carry the weight of this, to live with the absence and the anger and the grief and the what-ifs. That's the reality. That's the cost of violence. That's what happens when a conflict escalates to the point where someone dies and someone else is charged with murder. Everyone loses. Some people lose more than others, but no one walks away whole. If you followed this case, if you've been part of the conversations online, if you've chosen a side or defend a position, I want to ask you to step back for a moment, to remember that these are real people, real lives, real families, not characters in a true crime story, not data points in an argument about self-defense laws or criminal justice reform. People who are suffering, who are navigating the worst moments of their lives, who deserve our empathy and our respect, even if we disagree with their choices or their actions. Because that's what's missing so often in these online debates. The humanity, the recognition that behind every headline, every hashtag, every hot take, there are human beings trying to survive trauma and loss and consequences they'll carry forever. So what do I think will happen? I think Holly's attorney is working every angle right now to secure a plea deal. I think the state, despite having charged first-degree murder, is open to negotiating because they know the risks of trial. I think Holly is facing the reality that she will spend a significant portion of her life in prison, and she's trying to decide whether to accept a deal that guarantees that or gamble on a jury. I think Romeca's family is caught between wanting maximum punishment and wanting this to be over, wanting to not have to relive the trauma in a trial. And I think, ultimately, this will resolve with a plea. Second-degree murder. A sentence somewhere in the range of 25 to 35 years, with good behavior credits, possible release in her 50s. That's my read. That's what the patterns suggest. But I could be wrong. This could go to trial. The jury could convict on first-degree murder, or they could acquit, or they could hang. And we'd be right back where we started, waiting for the next phase, the next decision, the next outcome. What's your theory? What do you think will happen? Do you think Holly should take a plea deal, or should she gamble on a trial? Do you think the self-defense claim has merit, or do you think this was murder? What does this case reveal about our justice system, about how we handle violence, about the limits of the law? I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's continue this conversation with respect and thoughtfulness, and an acknowledgement that none of these answers are easy. This case stays with me. The questions it raises, the tragedy at its center, the impossible choices everyone involved has to make. If it moved you too, if you believe stories like this deserve more than just headlines and hashtags, like this video and subscribe for more coverage of cases that matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for caring enough to engage with the complexities, not just the outrage. That's how we move towards something better. That's how we honor the lives caught up in these tragedies. By paying attention, by asking hard questions, by refusing to look away.